Hey folks, everything new under the sun. We're going to take a look at this CBC article that simultaneously confirms that climate change is not observed, not based on empirical evidence, and two, that the creation of the world is an accurate depiction, accurate retelling in the Bible of what actually happened on Earth, and that humans did live all around the Earth at one point in time, and it wasn't millions of years ago. We're going to take a look at this article, which is basically confirms these two items, which is pretty incredible. They didn't intend to, of course, but let's have a look at it. So this is Secrets from the Ice. This is a CBC article. This is the Nature of Things, which is a very left-leaning pro-evolution program on CBC TV. But I was listening to a radio interview, and basically what came out of it is that, yes, man was all around the Earth. At one point in time, the Earth was a lot warmer, and that the scientists who are doing this study actually don't observe climate change happening in the way that the mass media, etc., want to sell it to us. The Nature of Things, Secrets from the Ice, tells a story of how over the last 20 years, Canada and the Arctic countries have become the frontier of new science related to climate change. Ice patches are melting faster than ever and are revealing ancient human artifacts, wildlife, and human remains, telling us more than we've ever known about human history in the subarctic and at altitude in the mountains. So this is Otzi, the Ice Man, who started it all. Let me get a screenshot of that guy. Otzi. In 91, a body of a man was found melting out of the ice. Scientists were shocked when carbon dating revealed that he was only 3,300 years old. That fits with the biblical creation account, the timeline there. So he's not millions of years, so they're starting off okay. Affectionately named Otzi for being found in the Otzel region between Italy and Austria, he intrigued scientists with the possibility that new knowledge about human diet, clothing, and tools could be hidden under the ice. A huge moment for Canadian archaeology and First Nations history came in 1999, when the remains of a man were found by hunters on an ice patch in the Tashashini-Alsac Park along the Yukon and British Columbia border. Members of the First Nations government and RCMP came together to examine the site. The discovery of his body represented the oldest well-preserved human remains to melt out of the ice in North America. Kwai Dang Shin Chi was found with an array of tools and clothing that told us about the life he lived. Even more DNA testing revealed that had 17 relatives are alive today. So these are pictures of a military plane recovered coming out of an ice sheet, and more stories about this. So the key is, I was listening to the radio interview, and basically what they're coming out and is saying. Let me pull up my note here that I had. Basically, they were coming out and saying, we're finding evidence of humans melting out of this ice sheet. This shouldn't be. There shouldn't be humans up this far. There shouldn't be life up this far because these ice. These glaciers have been around for tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of millions of years, etc. A long time. There shouldn't be life up here. And what do we see? We see humans frozen in the ice, confirming that there was human population up there. And I predict, this is my prediction that I make, given that the Bible is accurate, you should be able to make predictions based on it. I predict that they will find lots more human evidence of human habitation under all the glaciers as they melt back. And this confirms that the Earth is not as old as they think. And indeed, according to the book of Genesis, prior to the flood, humans were living all around the world, all around the Earth, because at that point the Earth was all a temperate region. It was all the same temperature because of the ice canopy. The sun coming in, the ice canopy would have diffused the sun around the Earth, and it would have been all basically a similar temperature where humans could habitate the whole Earth all around. And I think this is what these humans remains and these remains melting out of glaciers. I think that's what it really confirms. This is what the guy on the radio broadcast was basically saying. We didn't expect to see humans up this far. This changes everything about where we thought there were animals living. They were showing caribou droppings, and they said, we wouldn't expect to see caribou droppings up this far. There haven't been caribou here for hundreds of years. And so I think it confirms the biblical account that there were humans all around the earth. And the further they go up north, the more the glaciers melt back, the more they find that, what was the land like underneath those glaciers? It was subtropical. It was subtropical. They find evidence of trees and organisms and things that would otherwise live in much more southern climates. So at some point in the past, the earth was much warmer. And prior to the flood, the earth was very temperate all the way around. There were not glaciers. Glaciers came from the flood of Noah. Now that's one thing. And then the guy started talking about, the radio announcer said, well, what do you think about climate change? Do you see evidence of climate change? And the researcher, this is what he said first. He said, well, the funny thing is that we generally observe the ice increasing over the 4 or 5 years, whatever number of years they've been there. They've seen the ice increase. Some years a little bit less, some years a little bit more, but generally it has been increasing. Although he did qualify his statement, he said, of course we know, this I'm translating, I'm paraphrasing. He said, of course we know that generally the glaciers are wasting away, but his empirical evidence over the time that he observed it is that they're increasing. And why? Well, he gave the answer himself. He said, well, if climate change is true, then we expect more precipitation. And what do we see? We see more precipitation. Although I don't think that's due to climate change, but we do see more precipitation. More precipitation means there's going to be more snow, more rain, etc., which is going to build those glaciers. That's what we see right now. We see the glaciers building. So what do we see with his empirically observed information that he said on the radio interview? He said they were growing. But then he qualified because he thought in his head, this doesn't really support climate change. So he said, but of course we know, outside of my empirical observation, we know that climate change is real. So I'm going to say that it's wasting away. On the other hand, it is partially true. It is wasting away because these were only created about 4,000 years ago. The glaciers only came to being about 4,000 years ago, where they were likely at their height of size, and they were at their max size, and so they're slowly melting it away, shrinking away. So biblically, we expect them to shrink away. This is not climate change. This is what we expect as the Earth kind of goes back to checks and balances, bring it back to whatever the level area is, the check and balance area is, the moderate area is. And of course, also, we know through the things that are melting out of it, like I said, what we know is that the Earth was a lot warmer in the past than it is now, significantly warmer than their predictions suggest about that climate change will ever have an effect. They also said that there's a silver lining to climate change. And of course, they poo-pooed this real quick. They said, well, we don't want to put a silver lining on climate change because climate change is bad. There is no such as man-made climate change, and the Earth was a lot warmer in the past. It's not us causing it. It's not necessarily bad. But what the interviewer said is there a silver lining to climate change? And the silver lining effectively was that, well, all these humans who were able to inhabit that land and populate and use that land prior to the glaciers will now be able to use them again as trees and plants and animals start populating the area where the glaciers have melted away from. So that would be the silver lining. Now that would just be the cycles of the Earth, the cycles of the warming and the cooling, and so they're calling it. First is saying there's no empirical observation of climate change. This is what they effectively observed. Two, they're saying climate change has a silver lining because now humans can actually populate the land again and make use of the land where it otherwise was just ice. And of course, three is that it proves that the Earth is not as old as they thought it was. and that things were a lot warmer in the recent past. Significant in the very recent past. This guy was only 3,300 years old. This is based on carbon dating, so that's a little sketchy. Although carbon dating is okay under like a couple, 10, 20,000 years for dating things. But anyways, this left-leaning, evolution-believing broadcast on CBC ends up confirming, by way of the radio broadcast, definitely listen to the radio broadcast, they end up confirming that the Bible is accurate in more than one way, and this is through observational, empirical science that the archaeologist said. Although he didn't want to admit it, he said it, but he always backtracked and said, "But we know climate change is real. But what I observed is this." It's incredible, and you guys need to pay attention to this. If you heard it, man, I was just rolling my eyes over and over, because more than once they proved that the Bible is accurate, that climate change is not real by their own observable evidence, empirical, testable, repeatable evidence, that we don't see climate change occurring. Sure, we see temperature fluctuations, but it was a lot warmer in the past than it is and right now, and then even their projections say. That's what it was like in the Garden of Eden, and prior to the flood, the earth was a temperate region all the way around. All the way. It was warm all the way around. There were no glaciers prior to the flood. Thanks for watching. This is incredible. I'll put the link in the description, and you guys can check it out.